So thrilling to be here on the publication week for Sybelia Drive, a novel that I first read, I think, perhaps more than a year ago, and just had the great pleasure of rereading. I loved it even more the second time, which is saying a great deal. And I just have to begin by asking Karin to read for us, because I really want to hear these beautiful words in her voice.
Thank you, Margot. I really appreciate that. I think we'll just start at the beginning with one of the many points of view, which we can talk about later. We'll start with the first chapter, which is in Lulu's viewpoint. And Lulu, at this point in the novel, which ranges over 10 years, 1967 to 1977, is all of 9 years old. And the chapter is called Girl, October 1967. Rainy paraded down on us the year my daddy left. It was the year when Daddy traded in our family car for the red and white VW bus Mama took to watching Peyton Place on Tuesday evenings, and I attached the gold stars for spelling around my dresser mirror. The Beatles asked us to sit back and enjoy the show from the stereo speakers in Saul's room, and the Central Florida sun lit up the house like it was on fire. It wasn't like we didn't all know change was coming, what with Vietnam breathing down my daddy's neck. On that October morning in 1967, Daddy put on his gray-green uniform and went to war. Mama put on her zigzag mini dress and went grocery shopping at Hull's Marketessen, one of the smallest storefronts on one of the busiest streets in Anna Clara. That was where she met Rainy's mother, Ava. Right in the middle of the produce section, mulling over avocados and melons, they had that dumb conversation about how to choose one. Mama chose Ava instead, dragged her past the checkout counters, right out the door and into our lives. It wasn't like she was a replacement for my daddy. It was just one of those things Mama did, like marrying more than once, or bringing home a stray cat just because it had pretty eyes and then realizing the cat belonged to the Lingstroms around the corner. Not that Ava was a stray or anything. Of course, Rainy came with her. Straight blonde hair and these freckles that coursed across her nose like fine sand. She caught me on the upside of down. Now here was a girl I'd seen before on the school playground. The girl with the pretty dresses and the charm bracelet that jangled when she moved. She wasn't in my grade, but the one above. She shied away from me at school, but now I had her right in my own living room. You know how to play jacks? I asked her. She cupped her hands and shook them, then lowered one in a pretend toss. What about board games? I pulled her into my room and showed her the boxes piled in one corner. Life, Mystery Date, and Old Chutes and Ladders. She only shrugged her shoulders. You know how to play any cards? I figured she did. Of course her answer was, go fish. But she said it more to the shag rug on my bedroom floor than to me. Pretty soon, Rainy practically lived with us. Ava too, when she wasn't lounging on a beach somewhere, luring in the GIs on leave. I was thrilled, a friend all my own, one who'd follow my every step, fasten her arm in mine and stick to the rules. The way she said my name, Lulu. The L's looping around inside her mouth, soft and undecided, made me want her as my friend even more. Right away, I just loved her to death. Once, as Rainy slept, I scissored her long hair in half and she woke up with the shoulder-length cut she should have had. Sure, she was surprised, looked at all the blonde on her pillow and cried. My mama evened it up where it fell crooked and then punished me for good measure. And Rainy got used to it. She got used to a lot of things around here, like getting in on the action even when there was no action and we had to make some. Spying on Mrs. Laurent next door, knocking over the Callahan's garbage cans and blaming it on the Walbright's dog. promising to meet my brother Saul at the lake and then stealing his hidden stash of cigarettes and sitting up in the orange trees and smoking. The road we lived on, Sybelia Drive, circled the lake and curved around big yards and driveways and houses that were mostly one story. My daddy had built our house, so it was one of the newest in our neighborhood, all one floor with the citrus grove in back and a yard of live oaks out front. We lived on a corner with lots of windows and sliding glass doors, and I told Rainey if she paid attention, she could see everything that went on.
Thank you, Karin. That was wonderful. And it does such a good job of introducing Lulu and her magnificent, relentless intensity, the intensity she brings to the friendship, but also to many other aspects of life. It's wonderful that people have already started asking questions, and I hope you'll keep typing them in. And the first question to come in is one that I was going to ask. So I'm going to pretend I had the idea at the same time, which is, how did you come up with the very inventive structure for this novel? I mean, many novels don't go directly from A to B to C, but your novel especially doesn't go directly, it goes very indirectly from sort of A to G to B to F.
It's true. It's true. And I love this question because this was a structure that I didn't intend to give the novel. It just happened because when I realized that it was going to be set during the Vietnam War, and this was basically a home front story, I knew that there would be multiple points of view because there are so many voices in wartime. So part of it comes from the origin of the novel, which there was many things converging at once. We were, as a nation, becoming involved in Afghanistan and Iraq. And this was sort of subconsciously bringing back memories of my own childhood. I grew up like Rainey and Lulu and Saul during the Vietnam War, from the early 60s through the aftermath, which went really into the 80s, but definitely through the late 70s. And I knew that if I wanted to tell a complete story about the small community in Central Florida, that everyone had to be involved. And I did set up a very steep climb for myself with writing the novel. I was thinking about it today, about how to describe the structure. And I've always thought of it as the many viewpoints are like spokes of a wheel. Each spoke is a different perspective. And then the hub and the rim are the landscape in which these stories are told. And if you want to go to actual geographical landscape, it would be Florida and Vietnam. So these things are containing those stories and allowing them to happen and turn at the same time. So I thought that was kind of a good analogy.
I like that very much.
It was definitely a steep climb. And I thought from the very beginning, when I was basically dared to write a new story in the early 2000s by a writing teacher of mine, and it was such a good dare that she said it with spark in her voice, "I dare you to write a new story," that it gave me permission to go forward into doing something I'd never done before, which perhaps was a little ambitious, but it was intended to be link stories. And then I realized by the time I got to grad school, no, these, with the help of my advisor, Lori Foos, this is a novel that's coming forward, despite the fact that there are so many different perspectives.
And did you find yourself writing non-linearly, non-chronologically? Was that something that just came instinctively, or was that part of the process of figuring out the novel as a whole?
Yeah, it's interesting. Much of the story is told in chronological order between 1967 and 1977, but there are some chapters where I felt, with peripheral characters, where I felt that in order to give a background for who they were and how they were important as one of the many voices in the story, I had to go farther back in time. I had to go to a time before the Vietnam War, and then reach out a little after we stopped sending troops to Vietnam, and also when the United States military left Vietnam. So, and the fact that they sort of they're not really, they are in a chronological order, and then they come out of chronological order, depended on the character, but it was purposeful.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, besides your teacher's dare, what a great idea to dare someone to write a story. Can you say what was sort of the origin, or what propelled you into this? I mean, you talk about the conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq, but it seems like there must have been sort of more that made this resonate for you.
Yeah, there was the initial story that I wrote wasn't the one that you all heard. It was Rainey's chapter,
Okay.
which is developed and changed and been cut and so on and so forth in order to fit into the novel. But it did start with Rainey's voice, and it came from a memory of growing up at an early age. Between when I was born and 7 years old, I lived in a small town in Central Florida, Winter Park. And a friend and I, we were both 6 years old or so. We were walking through her lakeside neighborhood, which I committed to memory somehow, and is basically where Sybelia Drive is, even though it's not. And we were wandering through the backyards, which led into orange groves and into more backyards. And we heard this woman screaming and wailing and crying out, and then the sound of shattering glass. And of course, we had to know what in the world was going on. So we approached the house where the sounds were coming from, and there was a woman standing in a sheer nightgown in the middle of her carport, surrounded by this brilliant broken glass and china. It looked like every piece of breakable, anything in her house was there on the carport. And I remember feeling pretty scared about this moment. And we retreated, but it stayed with me. And so, like, these sort of telling moments that you put to the side and you don't think about them for a long time, and then they come back in a very sharp, piercing way and need responding to. So that's pretty much the true origin of the story, is that memory.
Yeah, and an amazing scene in the novel, which yeah, it's a very harrowing